Actually, if you're talking about history, then we do have to talk about the Balfour Declaration, because the discussion of why was there even a discussion about, I mean, you do understand, even before the Balfour Declaration, if you look at, for example, the communications between Chaim Weizmann,
right,
and British officials,
yes,
you'll find that those letters, for example, from Weizmann and those officials, was saying like, why don't you go into Uganda? And this is actually written. You can go read this.
Yeah, okay, that could be true.
Why don't you?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
It's not, I mean, I've got the primary source materials if you want.
I'm not arguing on this.
Right.
Yeah,
So the question is.
Yeah, I'm not here to argue on history. Yeah, okay.
Well, we have to speak about something, isn't it?
Yeah, okay.
Right.
I'm not arguing.
Otherwise, what we're here to do, right?
No, I'm here to say.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
You're making a historical case, right?
No, I'm saying as of now, the Jewish people have a right to the land of Israel. Do you agree to that?
I'll tell you, there is an extent to which that is true. I accept
so
that.
We agree.
There is, no, it's not completely agreement.
Okay.
Look, I'm saying that there is an extent to which that is true. Absolutely.
Okay,
Jewish people, and by the way, I haven't got any problem in saying that outright.
Okay,
that
cool.
Jewish,
so that's
Jewish people, and here's my issue.
And I'm not coming to push Muslims. I think Muslims also do.
So Muslims are, no, I would disagree with that. Muslims are 1.8 billion people of the world.
Okay, the Muslims,
and if they all had the right to go there, it would be overpopulated.
Okay,
right?
That's true. Yes.
Yeah.
But I think the Muslims that were living there, or the Muslims that associate that.
You mean the Palestinians, right?
Palestinians, yes.
Arabs. You can call them Arabs. Arab
100%,
Palestinians,
yes,
or whatever.
Exactly, yes.
Okay, no problem. Just for the sake of argument,
right.
What I'm saying to you is, what I find troubling, is the fact that in the first instance, the Jewish lobby, or you can say the Zionist movement, which you said you don't really agree with anyway.
I don't necessarily, yes.
Yeah, in all cases. But they were given the options by this other colonial administrator called the British Empire. Where do you want to go, really? And then the case was made by Chaim Weizmann and the other, Zionist propagators. They go to Uganda. No, Uganda, they said, it's nothing to do with us. We don't want to go to that place. We want to go to a place where our people, right, historically were located, which is in this place called Israel, or this place called Palestine, but which we call, or are going to call Israel. Yeah. This is the history. And then after that, Arthur Balfour put forward the Balfour Declaration.
That wasn't all the Jewish people. There's been Jewish people living in Israel throughout history. We're talking about most of the Jewish people.
Yeah, I haven't got a problem. Look, I'm not talking about the demographics of that area throughout history. That's a different discussion.
Yeah, okay.
But what I'm saying is that when the Balfour Declaration was put in place, that Balfour Declaration basically gave the right of one people to come into another people's land without the permission of those people that were there. All right, now that is the equivalent of, from a historical perspective.
We said that the British governed post 1948 the land of Israel.
You mean pre?
Sorry, pre. I'm getting the wrong word. Pre.
Okay.
We said that. So who's this other peoples that you're representing and saying that this is their country?
What do you mean? Sorry.
You said that the Balfour Declaration stated that the Jews can go to another country, another people's country, and rule it.
But it was. They didn't even say it was a colony, though. They didn't even say we ruled over that land like that. They said we have a mandate to govern in that area.
Okay,
so according to their own
right over to the Jewish.
Yeah, they had no right to give that right.
Why not?
Because they according to their own premise, they said we have a mandate to govern. They didn't have we have a mandate to change the populations. But that wasn't part of that. That wasn't part of the agreement.
But when you give when you give that right over to the Jewish people,
it wasn't given over to them. It wasn't. By the way, they took it over in World War I. Just to let you know.
No, but that's we spoke about history.
So. No, what we said, countries conquering other countries took a completely different flavour after World War I and after World War II than it did before those times.
In what way? Give an example.
So for example, the League of Nations was established after World War I, and the UN was established after World War II. Those tied countries together into agreements. Now, what was happening during World War I? During World War I, when the Balfour Declaration was actually written, that was a time where there was a structural rebalancing of powers. The Ottoman Empire collapsed at that time, and that particular area, which was Palestine at that time, was overtaken by the British Empire, through which they did these deals, which they had no right to do under their own principles, and they gave.
Why did they not have a right to do that?
Because what right do they have to do that?
Because
that's the question.
They ruled the land of Israel.
But they said they had a mandate to govern there.
Put it this way: does England now have a right to give Gibraltar back to Spain if they want to? The British government.
Say that again, sorry.
Does the British government, talking about, let's say, Gibraltar, which is a British colony.
Yes.
We own
it's not a colony. It's part of Britain.
It's part of Britain. Do they have a right to give it to the government of Spain? Do they have a right to do that?
Well, not when the populations have not consented to that, according to democratic principles. The population, like you're just basically asking, can countries switch?
The population doesn't want the British government to either.
Okay, that's a different question now. You're asking now if the population, though, but now perfect. So you're saying the will of the population is important. So
yes,
if we go now, so was there a referendum that was done at that time with the Palestinian people? Do you want to be replaced by Jews? And if there was no such, then according to what your theory of justice is, then it shouldn't have been done, right?
No, my point is that governments that ruled countries have a certain right to give it to others. I don't.
No. I'm saying to you.
No.
You've said
but Gibraltar. Then
the mandate to the Mansur. Sorry, go ahead.
In regard to Gibraltar, if the British would want to give over to Spain, then they'd have a right. I would think.
So people that have a British passport, what would happen to them in Gibraltar?
They'd also have a right.
No, hold on.
It wouldn't be.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Just think about what you're saying.
Yeah. Okay.
People, right? Say England leaves the European Union. All right.
Okay.
And
say when?
Well, no, it could happen. It could not happen. We don't know, right? Say England leaves the European Union, yeah, and that those individuals in Gibraltar have a British passport, and this becomes Spain now have to leave that area because actually there's no right to residence for British citizens in Spain.
Right.
They're not part of the European Union anymore. Do you think that's justified? They have to all leave so they have to give up their homes and go.
I don't know if that's morally correct.
You don't know?
No. It's a very grey area.
Oh, so you think that's a grey area? That's a problem. So let me ask you a question, right? So you see now, I think I'm getting through to you. I do think I'm getting through to you.
I don't know if these morals applied back in 1948 when the English, because you see the English governed Australia.
Right. What I am saying, but those principles that we're talking about are the principles by which and through which the Western governments maintained legitimacy throughout the ages, especially after the 1500s, especially after Charles I and the English Civil War and so on. The liberal principles, the democratic principles, those things that you're talking about have to be looked at through the lenses of those principles that Western governments hold themselves accountable to. Right. So if you accept that a changing of government shouldn't be done unless the will of the people or the population is consented, after World War I, after World War II, then in that case it would follow that the will of the Palestinian people was not consented, and therefore that changing of government.
There were also Jews living in Israel.
So
why would the
they were Palestinian Jews, though, weren't they? They were referred to as Palestinian Jews.
Okay, fine.
Yeah. So those are
those.
I'm not talking about Arabs. Well, they were a minority, weren't they? If you look at the number, if you look at the numbers, once again, it's in the book of the Struggle of Palestine. If you look in the 20s and 30s, there was a flooding in of Jewish population only in the 30s. Obviously, in the 40s, there was after the Holocaust and so on, there was even more of a flooding in.
Of course, yes.
But in the very beginning, before all of this happened, you wouldn't be able to say that Jews represented more than 10% of the population.
But what you're saying now is that England was as democratic back then in 1948 as it was now.
No, I'm saying that it held itself to those principles.
I don't know if it did.
No, it did. They had elections. They had universal suffrage. In fact, that's in that very year, 1918 was the year. They decided that women will get the vote as well. That was 1 year after the Balfour Declaration. So what we're talking about is a country which was accounting itself on its democratic principles that were giving another country to peoples who did not belong in that country without the consent of the population of that country, and that was against their principles, against their mandate, against the UN law, and against.
I don't know what happened
and
today.
against the will of the Palestinians.
Today, if Britain would give Gibraltar back over to England.
Do you understand the point
I understand there is a point, but today, if Britain would give Gibraltar back over to Spain, then I don't know what happened to people.
What I'm saying to you is that those people, if they were forced to be evicted from their homes as a direct consequence of the change of government.
Who said Muslims were forced to be evicted or Palestinians were forced to be evicted?
That's certainly it's called the Nakhba. After 1948, there was a mass immigration from the Palestinians.
Because of the War of Independence. This is after the War of Independence.
Yes.
Now, what my point is, after the War of Independence, you can't talk about morally what's correct anymore, because the war in itself created a situation where people denied Israel, people, so therefore it led to two very diverse views, and people fighting each other. So obviously,
you think
post the war of independence.
But the thing is, Gandhi denied the state of Pakistan. All right, I mean, denying a state doesn't mean it's not a morally incorrect stance. The legitimacy,
never said that,
right? So if someone says the way this state was established,
you said the point that
is immoral or illegitimate.
Without the war of independence, had Jews governed the land of Israel, then what you're saying is, had Jews governed the land of Israel without the war of independence, without the war of people, then the Muslims would have been driven from their homes and exiled from the country. And I'm not willing to stand by that.
No, it's not that they were going to. That's a hypothetical articulation. I'm saying that they were, in fact, that is what happened.
I'm saying that's because the Muslims didn't agree to the change in government.
First of all, let's use the word Arabs.
I'm sorry,
right,
I didn't mean,
because it's not all 1.7
I don't want to generalize.
Or let's just say even 1 billion at a time, or 800 million. The population.
The Palestinians didn't abide to the change in government.
Yes, why should they do? Why? Tell me the reason why they should. So let me ask you a question.
I've asked you what happened. What would happen today if Gibraltar would be the British government would give Gibraltar back to Spain?
Let us say, for the sake of, let me give you.
People have a right there to
fine. Let's put it this way.
Yeah.
If we continue with this train of thought about conquest and so on, let's say, for instance, America stops being a superpower, stops being Israel's friend, and Israel gets taken over by another government through conquest, okay?
Yeah, okay.
They take over fair enough.
Yeah.
Now, do you accept that they should change the populations, tell the Israelis, the Jews at that time, to go to another place, go back to Europe, yeah? And we're going to put this country back for example, these individuals. Do you accept that that's a fair recourse?
It's probably a bit anti-democratic, yeah.
It's anti-democratic.
Yes.
It's not moral.
It's not moral, yes.
So why is it moral in the first instance, but it's not moral for that one?
Because I said that you're saying that when the Jews had the plan to take over the land of Israel, they planned to drive Muslims out. I don't think that's necessarily true.
Actually,
you're giving me an example of a country telling all the Jews after they've taken over the land of Israel to leave.
Well, I will tell you something. This is a specific question on history.
Okay.
Ilan Pape actually wrote. He's an interesting historian.
Okay.
He wrote a book on he looked at the topographical information in that area at that time in the 40s and 50s in Palestine, and he also looked at plans. Like, this is in the primary source materials that you can actually retrieve online. For example, Plan Dalit. Plan Dalit was a plan which was from the Israeli government, which detailed within it that we were trying to reduce the population sizes of the Arabs and increase the population sizes.
I disagree to that.
Right, so
I can't justify that. And I said at the beginning, I don't necessarily justify Zionism.
No problem. But what I'm saying is,
I can't justify it.
But what I'm saying to you is that every time you're asking me for evidence, I can give you the primary source evidence. It's easier to give primary source evidence. It's not difficult to do that, right? So what I'm saying is that there is clear demographic information, clear government resources that can point us to the fact that there was a concerted effort by the Israeli government in 1948 onwards that meant that Jewish elites, I should say, tried to force through genocide.
I do not.
Well, Plan Dalit is. What is genocide? It's literally
harassment of a people.
So they tried to get rid of those individuals from that country. That is referred to as genocide.
I told you this is all after
1948.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So is that justifiable then?
No, that's not justifiable.
So, okay.
But you're mixing two things up here.
Which are? Yeah.
There's what should have happened and what did happen. What could have happened was the Jews taking government.
Yes.
And there's Muslims staying there.
Okay.
And
Arabs.
Sorry.
Yes.
The Palestinians staying there, and there being some sort of country with Palestinians and Jews sort of getting along.
Okay, we'll finish it in 5 minutes. Okay.
But where Palestinians and Jews sort of getting along without any.
Who's the ruler though?
The Jews, because the British because that's a moral debate.
It's not a moral debate. You just decide.
You agree to me on that.
We accept. No, I said that was a medieval. That was a medieval construct. I'm saying that
what
the British
Gibraltar if it would go to Spain.
I already talked about that. That's
you tell me.
I told you. Well, if the country is going to be consistent with its democratic principles, there's no way possible that Gibraltar can be returned back to Spain without at least a referendum from the people of Gibraltar. Do you agree with that? Referendum meaning a vote of all of the people in that country.
I'm not sure.
So you think that they can?
Yeah, right. But the problem.
Well, I don't think.
The problem is that the people didn't choose that democratic system to begin with. If you'd have a country that,
look, that's the thing. But they didn't choose it, but they were forced into it. These are the principles.
The English changed from capitalist democracy, so now
I don't get it. Sorry.
The problem is that even the English, they weren't democratic to begin with. They took over the country without being democratic. When the English did, and when they went conquering around the world.
No, but they so still, even when they're that's not correct. Because even when they were conquering around the world, they held themselves to liberal values.
Right.
Do you know that? I mean, do you know Napoleon, when he was doing, by the way, he was referred to as a liberal dictator.
Okay.
Which might not be democratic, but certainly is liberal. So far as holding themselves to these kind of values are concerned, there's more to be said by way of the coexistence of liberalism and colonialism, democracy and colonialism. It's not as far as to say whenever colonialism existed, democracy and liberalism didn't. They did actually coexist together in the British Empire. What I'm saying to you,
let me just finish my point.
Yes, of course. Go ahead.
That after 1948, you can't bring a proof to what could have happened.
Okay,
that's what did happen.
Yeah.
To what should have happened. After 1948, what happened was, because the Palestinians didn't agree to the takeover, where you could say they were right or wrong,
I think
since then there's been a major divide and split within the land, within the Holy Land, let's call it.
Yeah.
Therefore, there hasn't been any agreement on anything. So when you when you tell me that Israelis have agendas to do this to Muslims and to Palestinians,
I didn't. All I've done, to be fair, Isaac, I've done is provide primary and secondary source evidence whenever you've asked me for anything. So you've asked me.
So what's your point? What's your point now?
Isaac, let's finish off. The point is, if you are, depending on what your moral framework is, if your moral framework is you believe that the will of the people should be respected, then we know that the will of the Palestinian people was not respected. If your moral framework is, if you're being honest and straightforward and say my moral framework is Judaism, yes?
Yes.
If you just say that, then I'll respect you more, to be honest with you, because you have much stronger case.
That could also be.
Right, no, fine. If you said my moral framework is Judaism, right?
That could also be.
No, I'm saying so also be. It's fine. Then let's not have this pseudo intellectual discussions about the UN and about international law, about democracy, about liberalism. Let's throw all of that into the dustbin of ideas, which, to be honest with you, those atheist Zionists, what I find incredible about it is that they adopt the Jewish position.
They create a Jewish identity as atheists. That's a oxymoron.
However,
I completely agree to
that. I agree. But however, there's something more to be said by way of that. I would say if you were to take the Old Testament narrative very seriously, then it's from the Nile to the Euphrates. So that would mean that you have to stand and also say that the Jews have as much right in Palestine as they do all the way up to the Euphrates and all the way down to Egypt. Not only just Sinai, by the way.
That could also be.
Yes. So not only just Sinai, so into where all those areas up until the Nile. And so if you have that position, then all you're saying is we have the right to war. What I would say, if that is your position, and I'll end with this, right?
But I don't agree to that. I don't necessarily agree to that because that could only go to that. You could say that's only in the days when Messiah comes and we've been exiled.
What I would say, if that is your position,
but no, don't say that's not necessarily my position.
No, but even if someone had, because that's the only way you could work the argument, and we've looked at every other way. If this
I never said no.
We've looked at the democratic alternative. We looked at the post.
And also, there's another argument to be argued is that that's what happened in 1948.
Okay.
The question is now, what's going on in Israel?
Okay, let me just finish off my thought here.
Which means two sides of
Let me just finish off my thought here. Okay. Even if you had this conquest ideology, which by the way, if you have it, you have it. If you believe in it, you believe it. I would say to you, but you didn't even fight yourself. That's what I would say. The Jews didn't even fight themselves. They relied upon Big Brother British Empire to do all the fighting for them.
No, of course the Jews.
Oh yes, they did.
Of course they fought against the British themselves.
No, they didn't. No, they fought against the British in little Haganah and Irgun groups.
Yes. Of course.
Well, I'm not talking about that. They did not conquer the land themselves. They relied upon a proxy empire to do that. So I would say to you, you can't. I would have a lot more respect for you if you could say my forefathers fought your forefathers and beat them. If you said that and conquered the land and they were forced to leave, no problem. Even if you said
have more respect for being Zionist.
Let me just say.
Is that what you're saying?
Let me just say that. And they did, by the way, beat them in some wars. where the Arabs were nationalistic and they've been divided and they had been humiliated. But what I'm going to say is this, is that when you guys, your forefathers that had this ideology, not all of those individuals, when they claimed to own that land, they didn't do the fighting themselves. They waited for some other empire to give them it on a silver plate. So you can't even use a conquest ideology.
But the conquest ideology means that we as a nation have a standpoint to fight for the land of Israel.
You depend.
We've been exiled we were exiled 2,000 years ago from the land of Israel.
No problem.
Since then, we didn't have a standpoint to even start fighting.
My friend, everyone was exiled from everywhere. In 1066, you had the Norman invasion.
When you say that my forefathers didn't fight, from where did you want them to be? From where did you want them to get a group from? We were in Germany.
You didn't even conquer the land yourself. You didn't even conquer it yourself.
Who's we?
The Jewish nation didn't conquer it themselves.
But at that point, there wasn't an identity.
They were fighting the British, actually.
At that point, there wasn't an identity.
They fought them, the guys that helped them.
At that point, there wasn't an identity of a Jewish nation so much. We were Jews scattered around the world.
You were fighting the British. That's what was happening.
Yes, you had a few groups fighting the British.
So,
as you say, what you're trying to say is...
those groups became the government. They became the government.
Yes, us as a Jewish nation didn't fight. But we didn't have a Jewish nation.
But how can Begin, who was the president in 1971, who was actually part of a splinter group called Urgun, which is a terrorist organization which killed 91 innocents in King David Hotel. He became the president of